Okay, beautiful.
All right, so we will start with student concerns, as was in my email on Monday. Because of concern, just from the form that you guys filled out last week, this seemed to be the most, I guess, reasonable way to proceed. It's not the best way, I will admit, but under circumstances, we kind of have to go this way. So the way we're going to do it is in the Ledge channel. I shared the copy of student concerns submitted for today's meeting. We will read these for the next 2 hours. Parliamentarian, if you don't mind starting the clock when we start. The way it's going to go is it says who the student would prefer to read it. So the first two will be read by me. The third one I think was a mistake by someone, but the fourth one is going to be academic rep. So that's BSOS, and just going alphabetically, that's going to be Alyssa Conway, then it's going to be Tori, then it's going to be Sarah. And I'll call on you guys. Kisley can unmute you to make it faster, and we will get through the student concerns. The goal is to read all of them today.
I have a question. What if the rep person isn't here? Do you read them if?
If they're not here, so I'm keeping track. That's why the waiting room also is, so I can keep track of who's here and who's not. And so it doesn't. There's only a few constituencies that aren't here, and so then I can take those. All right. So we'll get started. So I would.
Wait, I have a question because Alawi texted me it says he's waiting to be let into the Zoom call.
What is his name on the Zoom? Because I don't have an. I'm happy.
Okay, I'll tell him to text you. Just wanted to make you aware.
Yeah, thank you. Just let me.
His account for some reason calls him Patrick.
Oh yeah, no, he did change his name. That's just.
What is Patrick Akugu?
Yes, that's him.
Thank you. I wasn't sure who that was. So.
That makes sense.
Yes. Yep. All right. All right. So therefore, we will start with the student concerns. All right. The first one. As a Palestinian student on campus, the bill asking the university to divest from their endowment investments in the companies that oppress my people is very important to me. In light of current global events, it is imperative that we continue to fight for the rights and equality of all people, especially those whose health concerns are exacerbated by conflict and occupation. As the governing body that is supposed to represent all students at UMD, the SGA has an obligation to hear the bills that students are concerned about and fighting passionately for, and the divestment bill is one of these. And the second student concern. In light of recent conversations surrounding a potential BDS bill this semester, I'm asking the SJ to not take up such a bill at this time. With the move to an online environment, it is impossible to really do this issue justice, no matter what changes and accommodations might be made. Past divestment bills have inspired tremendous campus activity and conversation, and students just do not have the capacity to really involve themselves the way they want to and the way this issue deserves, whether due to technological limitations, limited mental and emotional bandwidth, or health concerns among students and their families. Students are having a hard enough time navigating the unprecedented challenges we're facing at this time, and it is unfair to them and to this conversation to propose a divestment bill under the present circumstances. The third one, and the ones that either don't make sense or they said they would rather not be read, I marked in orange. So the next one will be read by BSOS, Alyssa, if you could.
Alyssa, you're on mute.
Wait. In orange?
No, the one that, it's right here.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yep.
So thank you for taking the time to hear my concern. I am writing to you about some rumors that, okay, hold on, David, I can't see it because your name is highlighted over it. Okay, thanks. So I'm gonna read it again. Thank you for taking the time to hear my concern. I'm writing to you about some rumors that I heard swirling around that I'd like to discuss with my representative on the SGA. I've heard talk about a divestment bill potentially in the works. As a Jewish student at UMD, this worries me greatly. Not only do I fear what will happen if such a bill were to pass, but I hope you can appreciate the effect even introducing such a bill that would have on me and my community in these already uncertain and stressful times. COVID-19 has impacted my community greatly. The first major outbreak in the U.S. struck the Jewish community of New Rochelle, New York. One of the first to contract was a good friend of mine. Even now, Jews remain in College Park in fear of going home to their communities, missing out on celebrating Passover with their families. This week's leading up to last year's Divest UMD vote were the most stressful I've ever faced in college. How can you think of tests, homework, and projects when your community safety is up for debate? For me and my community, BDS presents a looming threat to our well-being on campus. When I first heard that we may have to face the prospect of another BDS bill, I was shocked and angry. I couldn't understand how our representatives could potentially put us in this position to defend ourselves in such a high-stakes situation. SGA should be doing everything they can to help students in this unbelievably difficult time. As my elected representatives, I urge you to please think about me, your constituent, if such a bill is in fact on the table. I hope you will look out for my community and not accept a divestment bill this semester. Thank you.
The next is asked for by the speaker. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy during this period of time. I want to voice my concern over a potential BDS bill that I heard could potentially be raised this week. Last year, when the BDS bill was proposed and brought to vote, I lost focus of everything else. Its divisive language and attacking undertone scared me. I struggled to focus on schoolwork and gave the bill hours of thought, discussion, and attending SGA meetings. I know many others who reacted similarly. I cannot imagine a worse time to bring up a similar bill. Regardless of the fact that I disagree with the bill's very premise, I know how divisive and time-consuming it will be for everyone involved. Unity has never been more important, and a bill that threatens that and intends to alienate part of the UMD community cannot be tolerated. The next one's going to be read by a residential rep, off-campus neighboring. Atara is not here, so Hannah Clark, please.
Because of the myriad of assignments and makeup quizzes I need to submit before Passover, this concern will be shorter than I would have liked. Last year, SJP proposed a very divisive bill, proposing that our university divest from Israel. Last year, on the Jewish holiday of Passover, I, along with hundreds of my peers, including some for legislation, prepared remarks and voiced my opposition and voiced my opinion regarding the bill. As I understand it, most legislation or university student government reviews does not draw this type of attention. Nevertheless, BDS bills, which cause most Jewish students to feel threatened, cause much unrest and draw a great amount of something. This has been the case at many campuses with an appreciable Jewish populations, as well as our own university over the past couple of years. Targeting the Jewish state makes Jewish students feel targeted, more so than an amendment to the Terps racing budget. Because BDS draws so much attention, it would be ridiculous to entertain it without students voicing their concerns. It would amount to suppressing many voices of outspoken and shy people who we know would have stepped out of their comfort zones instead of passionately for their beliefs. Please do not consider such a bill at this time.
Jake?
The next one's going to be read by the journalism representative.
Yeah, I just unmuted him.
Oh, what am
in the waiting room?
What am I reading? I'm sorry.
Your line 8 right here that I have highlighted. It's a student concern written by your constituent and requested to be read by you because you're the academic representative.
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I did not see this. I'm on my phone right now, so I apologize.
Is it okay if I read it then just for...
Oh, yes, please, because it'll take me a couple minutes to get it.
It was brought to my attention that BDS at the University of Maryland is trying to bring a bill before the SGA. What the BDS movement stands for is incredibly divisive, controversial, and destructive to an accepting campus community. That being said, considering there's only 1 week left to submit a bill, I believe that it is in the best interest of the entire campus community that the SGA not consider this piece of legislation. In holding with the belief that students should be able to debate any bill, the current global health crisis will make it incredibly difficult for students to formulate arguments that can lead to proper debate and deliberation. It is for that reason that I asked the SGA to not consider such a sensitive piece of legislation during such stressful times for many students at this university. Or at the university, it is enough that many students are burdened due to the current global health crisis. It would be inconsiderate and irresponsible to add to their stress. Let us not further burden the students who will be negatively affected by such a bill. And the next one is also, well, it was asked to be read by the speaker. Right now, in the midst of an international pandemic that has caused unprecedented stress in the middle of an academic semester that has been uprooted and completely changed, while student clubs are scrambling to find ways to still have their final events, as seniors are canceling graduation and post-grad plans and summer internships are also being canceled, now is not the time to debate BDS and divestment from Israel. Now is the time for SJ to focus on student well-being, making sure we are mentally and physically healthy. SJ should spend its time considering how to help the populations of students who are having the hardest time right now, whether they are international, live in dangerous or poverty-stricken homes, don't have stable internet connection, or have belongings left in their dorms and can't get back to campus. We must first help ourselves in our own community before dwelling on an issue that is far from home. If Students for Justice in Palestine and Divest UMD submit a divestment bill, I urge the speaker in my business school and North Hill representatives not to accept it. This bill, as we know from past years, will be contentious and the debate will take hours. I believe that it is not in the best interest of SGA or the UMD student body to focus on such an intense and divisive issue. We need to prioritize the emotional, physical, and academic well-being of our students.
Okay.
This one is requested by residential rep, off-campus outlying, so that's going to be Alawi is the first one.
Alawi, I unmuted you.
Yeah. Hey there, guys. Can you tell me what row number really quickly?
10. I have it highlighted.
10.
Hi guys, this is the video.
Wait, that's 10 is engineering. Oh, I see it. Okay. As there is a possibility of the divestment bill being submitted, I wanted to highlight why there is need for such legislation immediately. This is an extremely difficult time for the world, but it's important to note that we are all going through it together. We are all experiencing hardship, and it is frightening as the future is unknown. It is not a time to be selfish and think about one's own personal interests and emotions, but to uplift the voices of those who are unable to speak for themselves. It is a time where we must fight for our fellow people who are being oppressed, like the Palestinians. We cannot hold off on fighting against their oppression because the pandemic exacerbates the awful condition they already live in due to the occupation in West Bank and the blockade on Gaza. The virus does not discriminate who it targets. It will infect whoever it please. As we as a university does not act soon, it could be dire for the Palestinians. And I, as a Palestinian student on this campus, have always been terrified for the safety of my loved ones back home, and this fear has only increased since the beginning of the pandemic. I pray for their safety, I pray for their safety, health, happiness, and for them to see justice in their lifetime. But prayer alone will do little. It is our duty to help them. It is our duty to fight for them, and it is the duty for the student government to fight for students and their allies who are asking you to help protect their families currently living in Palestine. We must pass legislation that will directly help them, show them that we are in solidarity with their fight, and wholeheartedly against all forms of oppression. There is precedence in this legislation to be passed at SGA at UMD, divested from South Africa in the 1989. And as I am Palestinian student or this campus, this is a student issue. Anyone claiming that it isn't is undermining my and every Palestinian Terp's identity and experience as a student on this campus. Is there anything else?
All right, thank you. So then the next one is also off-campus outlying, but to honor the rotation, Alex.
I unmuted you, Alex.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, the divestment bill should be heard. To give a background on the BDS movement, it is a non-violent movement called for by Palestinian civil society, a grassroots organization in order to put economic pressure on the systemic oppressors of Palestinians. Its main goal is to uphold the human rights of Palestinians and elevate them so that there can be effective negotiation between both sides and bring an end to the conflict. It is not meant to be the solution, but a step towards bringing a just and equitable solution for all. If you ask the two parties to negotiate today, it would be like asking a prisoner to negotiate with their prison guard, which is useless and unfair to the prisoner, in this case, the Palestinians. 86% of Palestinians support BDS, and as their allies, we are not to critique how they have decided to resist their oppression, but must support them. And to critique or propose any other method would be belittling and discredit the Palestinians, basically telling them that they are not competent enough to speak for themselves. It is exactly like the criticisms of the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. The issue is not how they are protesting, but the fact that they are protesting at all and are brave and bold enough to ask for equality and their humanity. Economic boycotts have always been effective, and with a little research, it is obvious that the BDS movement is making strides in current society, with several universities passing similar resolutions, including Big Ten schools like Rutgers, University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, and Northwestern. Companies like G4S Security, Microsoft, divesting from Israeli face recognition firms tracking Palestinians, and Veolia, providing plumbing to the illegal settlements, have announced that they will halt doing business with Israel as it continues the occupation. A boycott was used to end apartheid in South Africa, segregation in the United States, and will end the oppression of the Palestinians.
All right, thank you.
Next one is also off-campus Artline. Shasha.
Sasha, yes.
Shasha, I unmuted you.
Unmute myself. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool beans. All right. The divestment bill should be heard to relieve the stress of Palestinian students. The BDS movement has 3 asks: the right of return for the 7.2 million Palestinian refugees, equality between Palestinian citizens and Jewish citizens of Israel. The national state law passed in 2018 makes non-Jewish citizens of Israel second-class citizens, and an end to the colonization and occupation of Palestine. Sorry, y'all. Oh God, the pollen. Oh God, going outside was a mistake. I'm sorry. Occupation of Palestine. All of this information is clearly. Speaker, can you read for me, please?
Sure. And all of this information is clearly listed on the BDS movement's website, and anyone who says otherwise is acting in bad faith. Let us look at Gaza, one of the most densely populated regions in the world. Over 1.9 million people live in Gaza. The majority of those people, 75%, are refugees from Greater Palestine and were brutally displaced during the, I'm going to mispronounce it, I think Nakba. For those of you who don't know, the Nakba, meaning catastrophe, occurred in 1948, when the threat of violence from Zionist soldiers forced 750,000 Palestinians out of their homes and killed over 13,000 Palestinians. Over half of the Palestinian villages were ethnically cleansed at that time. There are only 87 ventilators. Let us remember that the population of Gaza is 1.9 million in the besieged strip, and a majority of them are already in use. The systemic imprisonment and collective punishment of the people in Gaza by Israel for the last 13 years have left them extremely unprepared to face this pandemic. Gaza lacked the supplies pre-pandemic to properly sanitize their hospitals, filter their water, care for their wounded, and maintain a stable economy. We see how far more developed countries like Italy, Spain, England, and the United States are struggling to maintain the breakout of this deadly virus. The medical system of the United States, one of the richest countries in the world, is being overwhelmed. How do we expect one of the most under-resourced and poorest people to protect and fend for themselves during this time when before the virus, their medical system was already devastated? All right, the next one is
It's
residential
off-campus
vet,
neighboring.
and it's going to be off-campus neighboring, and the next is David Pontius.
I
David.
unmuted myself, I think, right? My name is Wendy Kelman, and I am a sophomore psychology major living in an off-campus neighboring apartment. COVID-19 has not been an ideal situation for anyone, but it has been exceedingly difficult for those of us in the Jewish community, as it is one of our biggest holidays, Passover, starting tonight. This is a holiday that is meant to be spent with siblings, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. But now, due to this virus, this time that is meant to be a time of togetherness and unity has turned into a time of isolation and loneliness. Right now is an extremely tumultuous time for all students, and the goal of the SGA should be to mitigate stress and ensure that students' health, both mental and physical, are at the forefront of their concerns. It is no secret that the divestment bill every year is an extremely mentally and physically for students staying up until crazy late hours, taxing occurrence, and the mental toll that it takes on students is evident through the amount of students walking away each year either crying or celebrating with relief. It is extremely divisive, and in a time where the biggest thing we need is unity, it is crazy to even consider a divisive bill. Furthermore, it seems extremely irresponsible of the student government to take on a bill that has such far-reaching implications on students' mental health. As in past years, we have heard from students that this bill requires them to relieve triggering experiences in student concerns. Students have tears in their eyes during student concerns, showing how emotion-filled this entire thing is. This is something that takes a toll on mental health, and to bring up something so triggering during a time that is so mentally taxing on students seems extremely inappropriate. I strongly ask that you do not take this bill.
Thank you. Next is academic rep engineering. So that's going to be Ashley.
All right. I am writing to advocate for the divestment bill and believe it should be debated, especially given the unprecedented times we are going through. The bill is important given the harsh circumstances Palestinians face, which will only become worse with the spread of COVID-19. One demand of the BDS movement is an end to the occupation and colonization of Arab lands and dismantling the apartheid wall which separates the West Bank from Israel. The occupation severely affects the day-to-day lives of Palestinians. They have to go through embarrassing, time-consuming, and dangerous checkpoints in their own land, have barely any political autonomy, face home demolitions and evictions, experience forced home invasions and constant monitoring, are not allowed to politically mobilize, and are constantly being harassed by Israeli soldiers. As the virus has spread around the world, these actions have not ceased, allowing the virus to be spread easily among the people in the regions. Israeli soldiers are still invading homes of Palestinians, and Palestinians are being detained on the street and thrown into prisons. Such interactions help in spreading the virus, and it places humans in close contact with one another. Palestinians still have to go through the cram checkpoints, which can only increase the chances that they will get the virus since they are far less than 6 feet apart. The West Bank only has 256 ventilators for its 3.2 million inhabitants, and over 80% are already in use. Palestinians living in the West Bank and in Gaza usually have to apply to receive life-saving treatment in Israel, as their own hospitals have few resources that they could not possibly perform all the necessary operations and treatments due to the limitations of what Palestinians can import and build in their own land from the Israeli government. Over a third of these requests are denied and with no reason stated, and the number increases every year.
Thank you. So next, the residential outlying, so we'll go back to Alawi.
Wait, my stuff just crashed. Can we come back to me? I don't know why my browser just closed on me.
Yeah, Alex, would you be willing to read it then?
Yeah, I can do it. Is it 14?
It's 15, I think, the one I have.
Okay, 15. I am writing to encourage the legislature to hear a bill which calls for UMD to divest its endowment from companies complicit in the occupation of Palestine. If you look at the website, divestumd.weebly.com, of the students pushing for this legislation, you see the majority of the organizations represent the Black and Brown communities, some of the most disenfranchised on this campus. Organizations like the Muslim Student Association, Black Student Union, Organization of Arab Students, Bangladeshi Student Association, and Somali Student Association, to name a few of the over 18 organizations behind this movement. All these communities see similarities between their own oppression and the oppression of the Palestinians. There are communities that will be the most affected. These are communities that will be the most affected by the coronavirus in the US because of systemic racism, which limits their access to healthcare. The fact that these minority and systematically oppressed communities are still pushing for this legislation during this time that is especially difficult for them and their communities shows how important it is for the bill to not only be heard, but passed. The legislation that might be proposed only highlights corporations, especially heavily militarized ones, complicit in the occupation of Palestine. If it were to attack anyone, it is only the CEO of these organizations, which are directly harming Palestinians. It would not affect the internships or jobs students face, as these companies are always looking for bright and fresh new grads to be part of their organizations, and students are free to apply if they want. The university at any time can tell the private company that handles their investments how it wants to invest. We are a client of the company and have the right to demand the organizations that are invested in. This is a classic business transaction, and it is ridiculous to think otherwise would be true. Free Palestine until it's backwards.
Thank you. Next one's by the speaker. My name is, I'll read the verbatim. My name is Ivy Radcliffe. My concern is with respect to the divestment bill advanced to SGA. With the many-fold challenges presented by the COVID pandemic, I believe that SGA must nevertheless hear this bill. The divestment bill represents a coalition effort from student organizations representing several marginalized communities outlined in the bill's appendices. The divestment bill has attained a strong showing of support from students of oppressed backgrounds, and a refusal to hear this bill would be tantamount to a silencing of these students' voices. In order for dialogue to commence, it must be allowed to take place at all. Therefore, I strongly advise that the SJ hear this bill so as not to undermine the representational integrity of your association. All right, next one's going to be read by the business rep, Jamie.
Jamie, you unmuted.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to okay, sorry. Is it number 17?
Yep.
Okay. As a student of UMD, I find it very upsetting that this bill is being brought up at the moment. The coronavirus has affected all the students of UMD and all people of America at a time when we are supposed to unite as a UMD community and as an American community. I find it very disheartening that a bill that spurs such divisiveness would be brought up. We are at a time where the entire county and more broadly the entire world is shut down. And I find it hard to see why this is a discussion we need to have in the midst of a global pandemic to show how unity has spread across the world. According to a public opinion poll published by the Palestinian Center for Public Opinion, 68% of respondents said they supported the cooperation between Israel and the Palestinians to prevent the spread of coronavirus at various extents. I want to reiterate, this is a time where everyone is uniting to fight a common enemy against humanity. Let us unite at this time and not look for ways to tear us apart. Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.
Thank you. Next one's going to be read by myself. I do not believe that the SJ should be considering legislation to divest from Israel during this global pandemic. Israel is currently working to find a cure for the coronavirus. It is definitely not the time to consider this type of legislation. SJ should be more focused on issues that actually concern the general student body. The next one's going to be read by the other business representative, Hunter.
Hunter, I can mute you.
Okay. This is not an appropriate time to hear the BDS and divestment bill. While I believe open dialogue is imperative, it is not appropriate to hear this bill as students are under immense stress due to COVID-19. Last year, when the bill was in person, the live stream was filled with racist and anti-Semitic comments. Having this bill be heard online invites harassment for students. This is not the time to hear this bill when students don't have the same support and opportunities for support that they would have under different circumstances.
Thank you. Next one's going to be Hannah Clark for neighboring.
Cool. As a senior at UMD, I'm in the process of dealing with my second semester senior year, changing in a completely unprecedented ways, ranging from not being able to say goodbye to my friends in person or not having a graduation. As a Jew, I'm having Passover for the first time with just my parents, an experience I've never had before. As I'm sure everyone can imagine and is experiencing, this global pandemic has impacted me in so many ways, turning my world upside down. But my experience is not just my experience. This pandemic has impacted students in so many different ways. This week is the last week to submit bills, and Students for Justice in Palestine and Divest UMD have expressed numerous times a plan to submit a divestment bill this year. I do not know if this is something they're still intending to do, but as a student who has attended and spoken at these hearings in the past, this event and bill is extremely emotionally draining. Simply put, in a time where lives are at stake and students' mental and physical well-being is challenged, it is irresponsible for the SGA to even consider a bill. This concern is in no way addressing the merits or the costs of a divestment bill. I'm simply asking the legislature to be mindful of students' mental health when considering the impact that a bill like this would have on students' emotional well-being from every perspective during this crazy time.
Thank you. SJ should not be considering any BDS legislation right now. with everything going on with the coronavirus. Instead, SGA should be focusing on more pressing topics, and they should table this for a later time. Next one's going to be your academic representative, undergraduate studies, Jordan.
Hi, sorry guys. I got a little caught up. Sorry, as a quick question, should I read the one that I represent or the one that I was emailed? Because I also received an email as well.
Just the one that from the student concern form.
Okay.
It's on line 22 that I have highlighted.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone. Basically, quickly, that a student who is an undergraduate student, who is an undergraduate studies major, who's off-campus neighboring, they responded and said that I think it's irresponsible to hold a meeting with the situation currently going on.
All right, thank you. Next, I don't think SJ should be considering any divestment legislation right now with everything going on with the coronavirus. Instead, SJ should be focused on more pertinent topics, and they should table this for a later time. It does not give the legislation the proper attention it deserves and makes it difficult for both those in favor and against the legislation. Discussing it would be doing an injustice to both sides during this time, and clearly there is no need for immediacy with the other issues going on in UMD. The next one, they said they would rather not have it read out loud. So this one's going to go residential, neighboring. So that's going to be David.
As a senior at UMD, I am in the process of dealing with my second semester senior year changing in completely unprecedented ways, ranging from not being able to say goodbye to my friends in person to not having a graduation. As a Jew, I am having Passover for the first time with just my parents, an experience I've never had before. As I'm sure everyone can imagine and is experiencing, the global pandemic has impacted me in so many ways, turning my world upside down. In my experience, not just my experience, this pandemic has impacted students in so many different ways. This week is the last week to submit bills, and Students for Justice in Palestine and Divest UMD have expressed numerous times a plan to submit a divestment bill this year. I do not know if this is still something they are intending to do, but as a student who has attended and spoken at these hearings in the past, the event and bill is something extremely emotionally draining. Simply put, in a time where lives are at stake and students' mental and physical well-being is challenged, it is irresponsible for the SGA to even consider a bill. As an off-campus student residing in a neighboring complex, I encourage David and Natara to tell the speaker to not accept a divestment bill. This concern in no way addresses the merits or the cost of a divestment bill. I am simply asking that the legislature be mindful of students' mental health when considering the impact that a bill like this would have on students' emotional well-being from every perspective during this crazy time.
All right, thank you. Next, it's going to be Hannah Kirk.
BDS is an issue that many students care deeply about, and it is impossible for them to be as involved as they want to be with all campus activities moved online. We are all dealing with unprecedented challenges under remote learning and social distancing, and students will not have the bandwidth, mental or digital, to address this issue in the way it deserves. Right now, we all need support, stability, and a sense of unity from the UMD community, and most importantly, from the students who represent us on our student government board. It would be irresponsible and insensitive of SGA to go forward with this bill. I hope you take this into strong consideration and dismiss the bill.
The next two were no, and I'll read the next two. The Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions Group has no place on our campus here at the University of Maryland. Deemed an anti-Semitic movement by countless senators and congressmen and groups, now nor ever is a time to boycott the only democracy in the Middle East. I would ask that SJ does not pass any BDS legislation now or ever. Next as well, I don't think this should be a top priority with everything going on with COVID-19. There are so many other areas where our mind power should be focused. All right, last one. Me as well. On behalf of myself and the student emails I've received, I'm extremely stressed about the prospect of having a divestment bill hearing. I've experienced how mentally taxing this hearing can be, and I do not believe a bill like this should be considered during such a tumultuous time. After spending 13 hours at the previous GBMs discussing making changes to the grading policy at UMD to better accommodate students who are dealing with the effects of the COVID-19, seems almost contradictory to introduce a bill that many students feel attacked by, when we clearly have demonstrated that as a body, our goal is to stand up for students. I am unsure why it would be a good idea to discuss such a contentious topic, especially during a national emergency that has caused an unsurmountable amount of stress and anxiety. And I joined SJ so that I could give a voice to students and make sure that their health and safety, both mental and physical, is at the forefront of our work. Introducing a divestment bill would go directly against these priorities. As a representative of the legislature, I deeply urge you to dismiss this legislation if it rises. I feel that it would be of benefit to all students if the bill was pushed to be considered during a time that did not cause so much mental and physical stress on our student body. So then academic education.
Point of parliamentary procedure.
Yeah.
We submit student concerns.
You shouldn't. And so I don't know. I mean, I assume it's RU or off-campus neighboring, and for the future, please don't.
Cool.
Yeah. Right. And I'll try to go through these to filter these out, but I didn't catch that at the end. All right. Education, please.
Am I unmuted?
Yep.
With the current pandemic going on, it is unprofessional for SGA to be thinking about any other legislation than figuring out how to help the community during these times. So many people are struggling mentally, and it is important that we feel supported by our university and campus. The mental health of the United States is at an overall low, and everyone should be focusing on their own well-being and supporting those around them. As an education major, I see how much my students are struggling and can only imagine what this stress is like for college students. In my classes, we often discuss that in order for a student to learn, they need to feel safe and supported physically and mentally before anything else, which is what we should be focusing on as one of the top universities in the country. BDS will only divide our campus, and during this time of worry and stress, we need to support each other now more than ever.
Thank you. The next one's anti-Israel is anti-Semitic. The next one is I've heard rumors circulating that Divest UMD has already sent out a petition and has written up a bill to be submitted to endorse BDS. I think that this is plain irresponsible for a group to bring up BDS during this time. This is a very complex topic that should not be brought to the fore during these times. Students are not on campus and are dealing with many obstacles, both physically and mentally, that prohibit attention to affairs such as a proposed BDS bill. The next one, the boycott, divestment, sanction movement has no place on UMD's campus. Our university's vibrant Jewish life helps make the campus culturally unique and diverse, yet passing a BDS bill would be a low blow to our community. BDS aims to delegitimize the Jewish state, is anti-Semitic in nature, and should never be passed at UMD, especially during these times of crisis due to the coronavirus. Next one's engineering, so Kisley.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, there should not be a BDS vote right now. We are in the middle of a pandemic. It's not appropriate.
Thank you. Next is Jared.
Jared.
Yeah, you guys can hear me, right?
Yep.
I'm reaching out regarding the rumors that have been circulating about a divestment bill coming up. I know that this is the last week to submit bills, and Divest UMD has already sent out a petition and has written a bill, which I can only assume will be submitted shortly. Right now, it is an extremely tumultuous time for all students, and the goal of the SGA should be to mitigate stress and to ensure the health of students, mental and physical. And that should be at the foremost of their concerns. I've attended the divestment bill hearing before, and it's no secret that is an extremely mentally and physically taxing occurrence. It takes a mental toll on all the students, which is observed by all the crying and celebration that takes place at the end of it. Student speakers have even voiced at previous meetings that the bill requires them to relive triggering experiences as they try to express student concerns. During a time like this, students do not need any extra stress. What I can say from my personal experience is that bills like these will add to the burden of all students involved who are just trying to finish their semester mentally and physically intact.
Thank you. Next, Israel is a very important place and topic to many students on the UMD campus as well as to myself. I do not feel that it is fair to have the issue regarding BDS discussed without a proper in-person meeting, given how close Israel is to my identity and to many of my UMD peers. Given the virtual situation we are in today, I do not think it is fair to discuss this issue at this time. Next, I do not think that a BDS bill should be allowed to be brought up right now, as this is a bill that is often argued on both sides by hundreds of passionate college students. This is a bill that is very personal to so many students, and it's not fair, right, or appropriate to bring up this bill to be argued while A, students are not in school to have the opportunity to argue their position, and B, it should not be done during the Jewish holiday of Passover. Next, off-campus neighboring. I guess, David.
Concern about BDO.
Next is engineering, Ashley.
During this crazy time in the world, I encourage the speaker of the SGA as a representative of the campus community to dismiss the BDS bill should it come up. Many people are struggling and worrying about the health of family members. This is not the time to discuss such an emotionally draining bill.
It would be irresponsible to bring this bill. And then undergraduate studies, Liam.
Am I muted now? All right, good, thanks, sorry. My concern is about the BDS bill. This bill, which is contentious legislation, should not be presented in the middle of a global pandemic. The bill draws student interest from both its supporters and those who oppose it. Student opinions are extremely important in this bill, and it is impossible to give all student voices the time and space to share their concerns over Zoom due to the sheer amount of students who are interested in sharing their views on the issue. Additionally, Passover starts this evening, and many Jewish students who are passionate about this issue aren't available around this time because of the holiday. It definitely isn't fair to the voices of those students to begin presenting a bill at a time that many of them cannot participate in the process due to religious reasons.
Thank you. All right, so Greek Residential isn't here, so I'll read the concern. Hey everyone, it's Alyssa Miller here. I hope everyone and their loved ones are staying healthy and are in good spirits. I want to thank you all for your work during this time. Your commitment to SGA and making sure students are informed gives me some hope that things may return to normal sooner rather than later. Thank you for that. This is a hard time for everyone, so it's important to remember to take care of yourself and your mental health. As we are all well aware, this bill is incredibly controversial, personal, and emotional for many, including myself, and I know for many of you. We know this by the hundreds of students that have shared their thoughts during student concerns and fought their way into this room. I understand that as SGA, it is your job to talk about this, quote, tough issues and ask the hard questions. I do, however, think that the decision to bring up this bill now is incredibly insensitive and detrimental to students' health and well-being. Right now, we have students worried about their health or the health of their parents and grandparents. We have students who are struggling financially now because they or their family cannot work and cannot put food on the table. We have students who are having troubles finding suitable housing or safe places to do their work. We have people struggling with physical health, mental health, or even both. Students need our support during this time. They do not need divisiveness or further cause for concern. Students on both sides of this issue need to know that their SGA cares about their mental health at this time. I ask that you consider tabling, introducing, or discussing this bill so that students can express their concern and speak to either side that they choose at a better, more appropriate, and conducive time. Thank you. Hag Sameach and happy early Easter to everyone. Stay well. Bsaw, so that would be Tori.
Not Sarah.
Tori hasn't gone, and Tori Neflin, and then Sarah's last name is past N, right? Yeah, Sarah starts R, so Tori's next. Tori?
Hey, Mr.
wait,
Speaker.
sorry.
Okay, never mind. I heard that the other BSauce rep had an issue beforehand with them having access. Tori, are you okay now? Being able to read?
I made it. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I was like trying to figure it. All right. It has come to my attention that the Students for Justice in Palestine and Divest UMD have expressed numerous times a plan to submit a divestment bill this year. Although this upcoming week is the last week to submit a bill, I believe it would be irresponsible for SGA to accept this and to debate it once again. This topic is extremely heated, and each year it comes up, hundreds of students come to debate its legitimacy. Considering the state of the university, as well as the rest of the world, I think it would be irresponsible to accept this bill, as it would only create more of a divide between its students during these trying times.
Thank you. SGA should prioritize pertinent issues such as the immediate impact of coronavirus on the student body and larger campus community. SGA should not be focusing on BDS and should push this to a later date for discussion. CMNS, Alicia. Alicia, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, I'm muted now. Please do not pass this bill right now. Passing this bill, especially in an online environment, will not bring the needed discussion relating to the overarching issue. It is a hard time for everyone, and this bill should not be debated when emotions are already running high. It makes me uncomfortable that this bill is even being considered right now, given circumstances with COVID-19 and the effect that this has had on students' mental health. No further action should be taken until a healthy debate can occur when students are back in a solid mental state.
All right, thank you. Off-campus neighboring, Hannah.
You don't have to move, Ari. Sorry, my roommates are calling to wish me a happy Passover, so sorry about that. Okay, I'm currently a senior at UMD, living in an off-campus neighboring complex. Nobody would have ever predicted this is what our second semester 2020 would look like. This semester felt normal, and I was completing ticks on my bucket list of things I wanted to accomplish as my last semester of senior year. But the virus rapidly started spreading. Life turned upside down, and what was supposed to be a relaxing 1-week spring break turned into an extended period of high stress. Over the past few weeks, I've been on an emotional roller coaster between feeling sad, anxious, frustrated, and stressed to more relaxed, calm, accepting, back and forth, over and over again. Accepting it was my senior year and that I was going to soon leave UMD was already hard or stressful enough. For a freshman, it might be that they were stressed about trying to find a social group or to fit in or find a routine that works for them. For a sophomore, maybe it was working to become president of the club they were so passionate about. For a junior, landing their dream internship. Each and every student has their own set of stresses that were present pre-pandemic, and now it's all been heightened. Right now, we as a university need to put 100% of our efforts into supporting each other and mitigating some of the extreme emotions we are experiencing. You cannot assume what it is like for some students at home or wherever they choose to self-isolate. This bill is notoriously known to be long, emotionally draining, and intense. In past years, students have cried while delivering their 1-minute student concern speech, saying that the bill has made them relive traumatic experiences in their lives. This bill puts students' mental and physical well-being at stake, and I believe it is irresponsible of SGA to consider bringing it to the floor. Please be mindful of this when considering whether to let this bill progress forward.
Thank you. So the entire BDS movement is built on anti-Semitism. Their goal is not to liberate Palestinians, but instead to destroy Israel and incite violence against Jews. If they wanted to help the Palestinians, they would do so by overthrowing Hamas, the terrorist organization that is maintaining a non-democratic hold on the Palestinian people, spending their financial aid from the rest of the world on rockets, terrorist salaries, and terror tunnels instead of schools, hospitals, and the well-being of the people they actively oppress. BDS does not exist to advocate for Palestinians. It advocates for the destruction of the Jewish people and their homeland. Next is Jared.
Because the university has moved online this semester, I do not think it would be right to pass/bring up the issue of a BDS bill this time. I feel very passionately regarding this issue, and it should be dealt with at a time when everyone is on campus and can be made aware of this issue and in a place where all opinions can be heard.
Thank you. Sarah for BSOS.
I do not think that SGA should be considering any divestment in BDS legislation right now. The timing is rather horrible with coronavirus crisis, which is an unprecedented and monumental moment in our nation's history. Instead, SGA should be focused on more pertinent topics that address the current pandemic, and they should table BDS discussions for a later time.
Shoham.
Year after year, day after day, the Palestinian people continue to face oppression under the hands of the occupation. Palestinians in Gaza are locked in an open-air prison, while those in the West Bank are having their homes and lands stolen. The Palestinian people have been stripped of their rights, with many international human rights violations happening against them. The BDS bill will be a step to ensure that UMD does not promote such oppressions, and that we're calling for the peace and justice for the Palestinian people. Help choose humanity with passing the BDS bill.
And then dialogue on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is so important and relevant on our college campus. However, students are already so emotionally vulnerable during this time away from campus. Students on both sides of this issue have strong connection to both Israel and Palestine, as noted by the many tears shed by the diverse groups. of students passionate about this conflict each year that this bill is debated. Regardless of whether this bill is or is not passed, a larger group of students will be strongly emotionally affected without local support of their peers and student groups and limited resources for effectively managing their sadness and anger. We are currently in a pandemic where many students have taken on new roles and challenges outside of being a student and advocate. Many students are now responsible for taking care of family members facing high levels of food and housing insecurity, as noted by the extreme increase in need for additional resources for the Student Crisis Fund and the campus pantry, are concerned for their medical health and or are now living with family members who are toxic for their mental health and well-being. This is a time that we as students and human beings need to stand together. Voting on such a divisive issue during this difficult time is not fair to students. Let's not split our student community when we need each other more than ever. I believe that this bill should only be discussed when students are emotionally, mentally, and physically in a better place and back on campus. Next, one of the aspects I love about UMD is the diversity. I love having conversations about everything from religion to culture to politics. However, passing BDS on UMD will divide our campus, as it will be the university taking a side, which the SGA has no legal right to do, as the governor has stated on many occasions. Additionally, the statement of this bill is absurd. The founder of BDS stated that if Israel makes a vaccine for COVID-19, it is okay to use. Therefore, it is clear that even the BDS founder is okay to take help from Israel while he continuously tries to boycott it. Additionally, the proposed bill has no viable solutions to account for the millions of dollars that Israeli supported / backed currently cover for countless departments for the university. Also, we can all agree that the safety of students on campus should be what the SGA and the entire campus community holds to the utmost regard. However, after BDS was passed at the University of Michigan, anti-Semitic rose in the hours and days immediately following. 1 in 5 students on this campus are Jewish and should not have to live on a campus that prides itself on diversity in fear of expressing their religious freedom. Furthermore, without a doubt, everyone around the world is dealing with hardships. Students are emotionally strained, some are sick, some have lost loved ones, and others are facing eviction. Voting on such an emotionally charged bill during this time is unfair to the student population, as students are already facing emotional turmoil. CMNS Alicia.
The BDS bill would make a more hostile environment on campus and would discourage open conversation about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as well as further enforce tensions within our campus community. I would personally feel less safe on campus if this bill were to pass.
Jake, are you in front of a computer or not yet?
Yes, I am. I have it up now. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so number 62, right? I believe that it is wrong for SGA to take up the BDS bill during this time. BDS is a very, very controversial matter. It is unjust to take up such a controversial bill when students are not able to be there to voice their concerns and opinions in person. As you may remember, the meeting concerning this bill lasted 5 hours last year. This allowed for the opportunity of students able to fight for what they believed in, defend themselves, and engage in an open discussion. By taking up this bill at a time like this, you are limiting students' ability to voice opinions on this matter. Though you may make the argument that students can do this virtually, we all know that it is not the same and does not have the same amount of passion and value as if it were to be done in person. It goes without saying that a virtual meeting on this matter does not compare to a 5-hour meeting, even in the slightest. Taking up a bill at this time only allows for a small part of the student body to be heard and neglects the rest of the student body as a larger whole.
All right, thank you. This, by my count, is going to be David Pontius.
BDS has no place on our campus, especially in times like this where Israel is one of the world's leaders in research to find a cure for COVID-19.
I do not think a BDS bill or a similar bill should be introduced at this time. There aren't any students on campus, and students who oppose the bill won't have the opportunity to come voice their concern as they have done in droves in the past. Next one. As a student at the University of Maryland, I want all students to have the right to raise their voice on topics they believe in. However, under the current circumstances, this cannot occur in the manner in which it should. I personally believe taking up a BDS bill at this time will not allow for the proper debate necessary for a topic of this importance. It is not fair to either side of the discussion, being that everyone's concern should be focused on staying safe and healthy. The world is facing a very scary and hysteria-filled time. There is no need to take the opportunity for students to raise their voice again. Engineering, so Kisley.
This is a difficult time for many students. Bringing up a bill of this nature during a time when many students are focused on caring for their families and trying to get their lives in order is both insensitive and absurd. The goal of this bill is not to directly aid the student body. Rather, the goal of this bill is to intimidate and alienate a group of students, many of whom originate from communities that are among the hardest hit by coronavirus. The time of this bill is a deliberate attempt to silence student voice. This bill was brought up on the eve of the Jewish holiday of Passover, when many Jewish anti-BDS students will be unable to form a response. In addition, this bill is being considered during a lockdown order for the state of Maryland when students cannot gather in mass to voice their concerns. As a student of the University of Maryland, I urge you to focus on furthering student needs and to reject this bill.
So the Greek residential representative isn't here, so I'll read the next two as well. As a student at the University of Maryland, I want all students to have the right to raise their voice on topics they believe in. However, under this current circumstances, this cannot occur in the manner in which it should. I personally believe taking up a BDS bill at this time will not allow for the proper debate necessary for a topic of this importance. It is not fair to either side of the discussion, being that everyone's concerns should be focused on staying safe and healthy. The world is facing a very scary and hysteria-filled time. There is no need to take the opportunity for students to raise their voice again. I don't think SGA should be considering any divestment legislation right now with everything going on with the coronavirus. Instead, SGA should be focused on more pertinent topics and they should table this for a later time. BDS is a very dividing topic on campus. We are all currently in a very stressful time, and bringing up BDS now would only make it more stressful. I personally feel very strongly that BDS is an attack against me as a Jew, and having to fight this from home would add a lot more stress to a time that is already extremely tasking. It will cause me and countless others to be even more fearful than we already are now. As a student at the University of Maryland, I want all students to have the right to raise their voice on topics they believe in. However, under the current circumstances, this cannot occur in the manner in which it should. I personally believe taking up a BDS bill at the time will not allow for the proper debate necessary for a topic of this importance. It is not fair to either side of this discussion, being that everyone's concern should be focused on staying safe and healthy. The world is facing a very scary and hysteria-filled time. There's no need to take the opportunity for students to raise their voice again. Off-campus outlying, Sasha, sorry, we skipped Alawi. So Alawi, are you able to read this one?
Can you tell me row number one more time?
71.
Thank you so much. The divestment bill should be heard by the Student Government Association because it is important for us as students to scrutinize where the university is getting its money. More importantly, if the university has dealings with companies who are complicit in the infringement on people's rights as humans, including those of the Palestinians currently under occupation, and especially if those infringements lead to the preventable death of innocent people, then the university needs to end these dealings yesterday. Please take into consideration, failure to hear the divestment bill is a failure to hear the voices of marginalized students.
So the Ellicott Community Representative.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I would like to voice my support for holding the divestment hearing this year. Firstly, even though I believe that human rights should not be a contentious topic, I understand that this bill creates a lot of strong reactions throughout the campus community. It is also true, though, that through this hard time dealing with COVID-19, SGA has still been holding meetings on contentious legislation and legislation that students feel quite strongly about, such as the AAA policy. There are hundreds of students that have declared their support for the divestment bill. If SGA decides not to hold the hearing this year, what precedent will this create? One of silencing these students' voices. Additionally, COVID-19 actually makes divestment a more pressing issue than ever. As the virus spreads throughout Palestine, the occupation, home demolitions and raids, and lack of medical supplies have not ceased, causing further hardship. The ask of BDS again should not be contentious. One demand is equality between the Jewish and non-Jewish citizens of Israel. Israel currently has over 60 laws, according to, I don't want to say this wrong, Adalah, which directly oppresses the Palestinian citizens of Israel. This does not include the systematic injustices that non-Jews face within Israel when it comes to access to land, education, and travel. Israel passed a nation-state law in 2018, making the Palestinian citizens of Israel second-class citizens within their own land by claiming Israel is a land only for Jewish people. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, even stated that Israel is not a state of all its citizens. This enforced the claim that Israel is an apartheid state, as Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank aren't allowed to vote for the leaders in Israel who will write and enforce policies which affect their day-to-day lives. The claim that Israel is an apartheid state was also stated by people who experienced apartheid in South Africa, like the Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela.
Shoham.
To whom it may concern, it has come to my attention that a bill to boycott, divest, and sanction the state of Israel will be formed in the near future and will be brought to our student government attempting to be passed. Not only am I upset that such a bill is coming from our own student body, but I cannot help but be alarmed that this bill is attempting to be made and passed now of all times. Our lives, both academic and personal, have been disrupted by the effects of COVID-19. Now should not be a time to cause more disruption by severing bonds and relationships. Now should be a time to support each other as a community. I find it absurd that some students believe it is more prudent and more timely to be social justice warriors against an ally of the United States, who, like us, is struggling against the COVID-19 pandemic, with over 9,000 confirmed cases and yet are on the forefront of developing a vaccine. I also find it irresponsible and ridiculous that students are spending their time, effort, and energy trying to make and pass this bill instead of aiming to help their local health community centers, as that would have an immediate impact on their lives of and the lives of others, while the passing of this bill would have a minuscule effect on their lives and the lives of others. Therefore, I urge the Speaker of the Legislature to not accept the bill if such a bill is made and brought to the student government.
Thank you. I am very concerned about the possibility of there being a BDS bill at this time. Right now, students are very stressed out and struggling to adjust to a new reality. Introducing such a contentious bill at this time would only serve to divide the student body and further add emotional strain. Alicia.
Despite the challenges of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, it is still important for the SGA to listen to the concerns of the student body. Consequently, it is important to listen to the vast amount of students who wish to have a hearing on the potential UMD divestment bill. This bill is important to many students due to its stance on ongoing human rights issues in Israel/occupied Palestine. It is apparent that the university invests in several companies who also have sold products to or work directly with organizations committing human rights abuses in the aforementioned regions. The university's ongoing investment of its endowment in these companies is an issue which directly affects students, especially those who have family living under such human rights abuses or have experienced it directly themselves. Therefore, it is still of high importance that the SGA legislature hears the divestment bill.
Thank you. Jared.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you for taking time to hear my concern. I would like to strongly urge SGA to not allow BDS to be brought up and debated this semester. If it were to be proposed, I think it'd be incredibly detrimental to the student body. During this time of quarantine, where many are alone, separated from friends and family, the last thing that we should be doing is drawing people apart even further. Last year, I spoke out and attended the entire meeting regarding the proposed SGA bill, so I know from experience just how divisive this topic and bill is. During such unprecedented times, the UMD student government really has an opportunity to make a strong impact on thousands of students who attend UMD. Decisions that you make should reflect this even greater responsibility that you now have towards the student body. While we are all physically apart right now, you should feel that it is your duty to think of ways which will make us feel more together as a community instead of creating spaces that pull us further apart. In addition, the current situation that most students are living in right now puts them in no position to be addressing the bill if it were to be proposed. I'm sure many of you have experienced the stress and anxiety that have come along with this pandemic, with classes moving online and with the disruption to your normal routines. I can speak to my experience living through this pandemic as someone who is part of a close Jewish community almost every day. My house receives calls from our congregation announcing the deaths of some of our members, and I receive emails from my high school informing me about the deaths of my peers' family members. My congregation has a growing list of names to pray for their healing. It is an emotionally tolling time for everyone, and I would really worry about the effects that this bill would have on the mental health of those involved.
All right, thank you. The bill regarding UMD's proposed divestment from Israel should not be heard by the SJ at this time. As many would remember from last year, this bill brings about an SJ meeting far different than any other. It is emotionally charged on all sides and packed with students who want to speak their minds, not to mention the line going out the door. It would not be just to have such a divisive bill heard and voted upon by the legislature in a virtual setting. The tone and context are not tangible in a digital reading. Students' voices would not be heard in the way that they would want to be. Moreover, students are adjusting to a new educational structure at this time, not to mention the stress being felt by the many who have sick relatives and friends. Now is not the proper time to hear such a bill, especially in an impersonal virtual setting. Engineering, Ashley.
Engineering South Campus Common Rep. I ask that you encourage the speaker not to take on a contentious bill such as BDS at this time. It is inappropriate given the state of the world right now and should not be given attention when matters like emergency housing, food supplies, and other pressing student needs are prevalent. There is no need to introduce more stress to the student body as the bill evokes a strong emotional response from all students, regardless of which side they support. Please ask the speaker to not take on the BDS bill.
And then next is BSAW, so Sarah. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, you're good. I strongly believe that bringing up a BDS bill at this time is not a good idea. The current situation that we are all experiencing with the coronavirus outbreak is very stressful for many students as it is, and many people who have strong beliefs about this bill will not be able to give it the focus that it needs. Students will not be able to voice their opinions or concerns about it, which would undermine the integrity of the bill and prevent the bill from being presented in the most accurate way. This is a very controversial bill, and regardless of my personal belief about the bill itself, I do not think that now is a good time to bring it up.
Thank you. And then there's one that was to the business rep that apparently was submitted at 6:01 because of its length. Hunter, I believe, has it.
So this concern was emailed to me a little bit after GBM began, and the student said, "Dear Quentin, Jamie, and Hunter, my name is," and she wanted her name to be read aloud. "My name is Ayelet Halbfinger, and I'm a freshman at UMD. I'm in the business school and a North Hill resident. I went to submit this through the form and was unable to do so due to when I went to cut down the length to fit the limit. The clock hit 6:01 and the form would not let me submit. And then David is allowing me to read it. So I'm going to begin the concern. Now more than ever, UMD students are at risk of increased stress and anxiety levels. The turmoil and chaos caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has the world stuck at home with minimal social interaction and fresh air. It has families' economic situations turned upside down and has left many students struggling with the standard course load, in addition to several newfound responsibilities and a lack of a healthy study environment. In light of this, SGA has a responsibility to ensure, to the extent of their control, there's no further psychological burden put on UMD students during this incredible rough and demanding time. I, Ayelet Halbfinger, a freshman business major from Washington, D.C., and a North Hill resident, am given increased anxiety as a result of this bill. Rumors are circulating about a bill being submitted to SGA, given that this is the final week to submit bills, and Divest UMD has already sent out a petition and drafted a bill to submit. I'm thankful every day that none of my immediate family members are suffering from COVID-19, but that doesn't mean its weight doesn't bear its fair share on my shoulders. My friends, their parents, and other community members of mine have been diagnosed. Their names in my prayers every day. I worry for them. I work for my parents, for my grandparents, and for my cousin who was forced to come home from his year abroad despite the dangers that traveling posed to him, given his immune deficiency. There may not be anyone in my household diagnosed with COVID-19, but we all suffer from increased stress and anxiety due to the current circumstances. Stress and anxiety are no stranger to my everyday life, but that's what makes the increased toll on my mental health so scary. I spent the year working my butt off planning at clubs, New York Trek, a regional conference, and a 700-person basketball tournament, which were all canceled due to COVID-19. My summer fellowship has been turned upside down, and my brother's wedding, which is scheduled to take place overseas over the summer, needs a contingency plan, and fast. My grandfather, who suffered from a series of strokes this fall, is left to celebrate this Passover holiday alone instead of with his grandchildren because of the risk we pose to his health. I pray every day that missing this year will be small and insignificant in the long run, but at the back of my mind, there's a fear that maybe COVID-19 is stripping me of my last chance to celebrate the holiday with my grandfather. I don't think I have the psychological or physical strength to battle anything else. I am lucky to be affected by this pandemic to such a minimal degree. I can only imagine the lack of strength of those who have it any worse. And so many members of our school community have it so much worse than myself right now. Right now is an extremely tumultuous time for every student. There are a few typos here. SGA should be trying to mitigate stress and ensure that students' physical and psychological health are at the forefront of their concerns. Every year, the divestment bill is incredibly taxing psychologically for all students invested in the bill, as well as physically for students who stay up all night organizing support. The mental toll that this bill takes on students is evident through the number of students walking away each year from the session, either with tears in their eyes or cries of joy, celebration, and relief. It is extremely irresponsible of SGA to take on a bill that has such far-reaching implications in students' mental health. In previous years, we have heard from students that this bill requires them to relive painful experiences during the student concerns portion of the session. Students have tears in their eyes during the student concerns, showing how emotion-filled this entire thing is. Furthermore, the divestment bill is extremely divisive, and right now we need our first priority to be unity. It would be crazy to even consider such a divisive bill. Rumors are circling about a bill being submitted to SGA, given that this is the final week to submit bills, and Divest UMD has already sent out a petition and drafted bill to submit it. Now, more than ever, UMD students are at risk of increased stress and anxiety levels. The turmoil, some of this was already said, so I'm trying to find where. It has, okay, 1 second. Okay. It would be crazy to even consider such a divisive bill.
Thank you. All right, so that was it from student concerns. So we'll move into roll call.